Ex-husband's shocking plan leaves ex-wife reeling. What dark secret has he been hiding all along? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Ethan and Sarah. Ethan had always been the kind of guy who kept to himself. A man of few words, he carried an air of mystery around him, especially after the divorce. Most people thought he had moved on, living his life with a sense of calm that bordered on indifference. But something was different this time. Ethan had been planning something so unexpected that it would shake Sarah to her core. For years, he had kept his secrets buried deep, never letting anyone in, not even Sarah, his ex-wife. Their marriage had ended in a storm of emotions, and both had tried their best to go separate ways. But there was always something unfinished between them, something left unsaid. Sarah, on the other hand, had tried to rebuild her life. She focused on her work, her friends, and moving on from the past. She had been doing fine, or so she thought. Until one day, out of the blue, Ethan reached out to her. The message was simple, almost too casual: "We need to talk." At first, Sarah didn't know what to think. After all these years, why would Ethan want to reconnect? But as much as she tried to push the thought aside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Little did she know, the conversation she was about to have with him would reveal a shocking truth, one that had been hidden for far too long. As she sat across from Ethan, the tension in the room was palpable. She could feel her heart racing, the same feeling she had when they first met, but now twisted with uncertainty. Ethan didn't speak immediately. Instead, he looked at her, as if weighing the right moment to speak, as if preparing to drop a bombshell that would forever change everything. "I need you to know something, Sarah," Ethan finally said, his voice steady but cold. "There's been something I've been hiding from you. Something that's been eating at me for years." The words hit Sarah like a tidal wave. What could he possibly have been hiding all this time? The man who had always kept his cards close to his chest, the man who had seemed so controlled, now appeared vulnerable. She braced herself, not knowing whether to be afraid, angry, or simply confused. Ethan's next words would reveal the dark secret he had carried all this time, a secret that would unravel everything she thought she knew about him. "I've spent years trying to forget, but I can't," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. The words didn't make sense at first. She had always known that their marriage ended with unresolved issues, but this was something completely different. She had no idea what he was talking about. Ethan continued, taking a deep breath as he gathered his thoughts. "It wasn't just a mistake, Sarah. It was something that I had to hide. Something I couldn't share with anyone. Not even you." Sarah's confusion grew as she leaned forward slightly, her mind racing. What was he hiding? What could be so important that he felt the need to keep it from her for all these years? She had seen him as a man who kept his emotions guarded, but this was something more. He wasn't just confessing to a small mistake. This was bigger than she could ever imagine. Ethan's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of regret and sorrow. "I thought if I kept it buried long enough, it would go away. But it didn't. And now, it's too late to fix." Sarah's mind spun. Was this about their divorce? Was this about something that had happened during their marriage that she didn't know about? Or was it something that had happened after they separated? The possibilities seemed endless. She could feel her heart race, 1,000 questions running through her mind. She tried to steady herself, but the weight of the unknown pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. She needed to understand. She needed to know what Ethan was talking about. Ethan paused, as though he was choosing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke again, his voice soft but steady. "It's not just about our past, Sarah. It's about something that's been happening for a long time, something that I kept from everyone, including you. And now it's time for you to know the truth. The air between them grew thick with tension, and Sarah could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. What could it be? What was this truth he was talking about? Ethan continued, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the table. I have a son, Sarah. A son that you don't know about. He's been living with me for the past few years. I've kept him hidden, and now it's time for you to know. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the room spinning, her thoughts racing. A son? Ethan had a son? How could she have not known about this? How could he have kept such a secret from her, especially after everything they had been through? Ethan's gaze softened as he watched Sarah's reaction. I never wanted you to find out like this. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid that you'd never understand, that you'd think I was lying to you. But now I know it's time for the truth to come out. Sarah could barely process what she was hearing. A son? Ethan had a child, and he hadn't told her? She felt a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, confusion, anger. Everything seemed to hit her at once. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked down at the table, his hands clenched tightly. I was afraid, Sarah. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if you would accept him, if you would even accept me after this. I know I've made mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you. Sarah could feel her heart break as she listened to his words. The man she had once loved, the man she had trusted, had kept such an important part of his life hidden from her. A part of him that she had never known about. The weight of his secret was too much to bear, and Sarah wasn't sure how to react. She wanted to yell, to demand answers, but instead, she sat there in silence. The room filled with nothing but the sound of her own breathing. She had never felt so lost. It has been days since Ethan's confession, and Sarah still couldn't process what he had told her. She had spent countless hours replaying the conversation in her head, trying to make sense of it all. How had she not known? How had he kept this secret for so long? The weight of the revelation sat heavy on her chest, like an anchor pulling her down, and no matter how much she tried to shake it off, it wouldn't leave. Ethan had a son, and that fact seemed to hang in the air between them, lingering in every conversation, in every quiet moment they shared. Ethan had been avoiding her calls, and she hadn't pushed him to talk. She wasn't sure if she was ready for more answers, or if she even wanted them. But the silence between them was deafening. The days passed, and Sarah's thoughts were consumed with images of a child. His child, a son she had never known about, a son who had been living with him all this time. She couldn't help but imagine what the boy might look like, how old he was, and where he had been during all those years they spent together. She tried not to let the anger consume her, but it was hard not to feel betrayed. Ethan, the man she had once trusted with everything, had kept this from her. She thought back to their life together, the long nights, the quiet moments, the dreams they shared for the future. How could he have hidden something so significant? How could he have made her believe that everything was fine when there was a child involved, a child who, for all she knew, had been living a completely different life? The more Sarah thought about it, the more she felt a sense of resentment building inside her. She had given Ethan everything. Her love, her trust, and her heart. And yet he had kept such an important part of his life a secret. As the days wore on, Sarah finally decided that she needed to confront him. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, caught between the truth and the lies. She couldn't let this secret continue to haunt her. So, she made up her mind to call him, to get answers. When the phone rang, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to answer, but he did. Sarah, Ethan's voice came through, sounding tired, as if he had been waiting for this moment. I know you have questions. And I want to answer them. But I need you to understand something first. This is not easy for me. Sarah's throat tightened as she spoke. You've already told me everything I needed to know, Ethan. I just want to understand why. Why did you keep this from me? Why did you hide your son? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Ethan finally spoke. It wasn't easy, Sarah. You have to believe me. I never meant to hurt you. But the truth is, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to tell you about him. I didn't know if you would ever accept him. Sarah listened to his words, and for the first time in days she felt a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. She didn't know if she could ever fully understand why Ethan had done what he did, but hearing the pain in his voice made her realize that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one carrying the weight of this secret. It had been a week since Sarah's conversation with Ethan, but the tension between them hadn't dissipated. Every time Sarah tried to move on with her life, thoughts of Ethan's son seemed to invade her mind. She couldn't understand how he had kept this secret for so long, and she couldn't stop wondering what kind of life that boy had been living. Was he happy? Did he know about her? All these questions filled her thoughts, and she felt torn between anger and a strange, lingering curiosity. After the phone call, Sarah had given Ethan space, but she realized that she couldn't keep living in uncertainty. She needed answers, even if they were painful to hear. The next day, Sarah reached out to Ethan, determined to get to the bottom of the situation. She called him and waited for the line to connect. When Ethan finally answered, she could hear the weariness in his voice. "Sarah, I didn't expect you to call." His words were soft, but there was an unmistakable tone of vulnerability in them. Sarah, feeling a mixture of frustration and determination, spoke up. "I can't keep living like this, Ethan. I need to know more about your son. I need to understand why you kept him from me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Sarah could practically hear Ethan gathering his thoughts. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but filled with regret. "I didn't want you to feel betrayed. I was afraid, Sarah. Afraid that you would hate me for what I had done. I didn't know how to tell you, and I didn't want to put you through that." Sarah's heart softened as she listened to his words. She had never seen Ethan like this before. He was always so composed, so distant, but now he was opening up to her in a way she hadn't expected. "I understand why you were scared," Sarah replied, her voice quieter now. "But you should have trusted me, Ethan. You should have told me. We were married. We shared everything, or at least I thought we did." There was another pause before Ethan spoke again, his words coming out slowly. "I know. I should have trusted you. I should have been honest with you from the start. But I was scared. I didn't know how you would react to having a child in the picture." Sarah thought about his words for a moment. "Is he your son, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She wanted to hear him say it, to hear the truth. Ethan took a deep breath before answering. "Yes. He's my son. His name is Lucas." Sarah's mind raced at the mention of the name. Lucas. A child she had never known about, a child who had been living in Ethan's world without her even knowing. She didn't know how to process this new reality, and the anger she had been holding on to for so long began to resurface. She wasn't sure if she was ready to meet Lucas, to step into a world she didn't know existed. "Why now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Why tell me this now, after all these years?" Ethan sighed, his voice softening. "Because I can't keep running from the truth anymore, Sarah. I've been hiding behind my fears for too long. I want you to know the truth, and I want you to be a part of it if you can. I never meant to hurt you. But you deserve to know." Sarah felt a wave of emotions crash over her. She didn't know what to feel. There was relief in hearing the truth, but there was also pain, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. She didn't know what her next step would be, but one thing was clear: this revelation would change everything. It had been a few days since Ethan revealed the truth about Lucas, and Sarah still couldn't shake off the whirlwind of emotions that had taken over her. She tried to go about her daily life, but every time she saw something that reminded her of Ethan, her mind would drift back to that conversation. She couldn't help but think about Lucas, about the life he had lived without her in it. Could she even be a part of his life now? She wasn't sure. She was scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of how this would change everything. The man she had once loved had built a life without her, and now he wanted her to be a part of it. But what if she wasn't ready? What if she didn't want to be a part of that life? Ethan had given her the truth, but now she had to figure out what to do with it. She knew she couldn't go on ignoring it, but she wasn't sure she was ready to face it. She decided to give herself some time to think, to process the information she had been given. But she knew that time was running out. Ethan had been patient, waiting for her to come to terms with everything. But how much longer could he wait? How much longer could she wait? The following weekend, Sarah made the decision to visit Ethan. She didn't know what to expect or what she was looking for, but she felt like she had to see him, to talk to him in person. When she arrived at his house, he greeted her at the door, his face soft with a mixture of relief and concern. "Sarah," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Sarah nodded, unsure of what to say. "I needed to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan led her to the living room, and they both sat down, the silence between them heavy. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About Lucas." Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of hope. "I know it's a lot to process. But I want you to know that you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I don't want to push you into anything." Sarah sighed deeply, her thoughts swirling. "I don't know what I'm ready for, Ethan. I don't know if I can just walk into this new life you've built. I don't know if I can just become a part of it." Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out, gently touching her hand. "I'm not asking you to just walk in, Sarah. I'm asking for your understanding. I'm asking for a chance. Not just for Lucas, but for us. I've spent years hiding from the truth, and now that it's out, I want to build something real. But I can't do it alone." Sarah felt her chest tighten as she listened to his words. She had never imagined that their lives would turn out like this. She had never imagined that Ethan would come to her with such vulnerability. But here he was, asking for a chance, not just for himself, but for the family he was trying to create. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she had to make a choice. The thought of Lucas, of being a part of his life, was both terrifying and enticing. She didn't know if she could handle it, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't turn her back on Ethan now. Not after everything. "I'm not saying it will be easy," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'll try. I'll try to understand." Ethan's eyes filled with gratitude, and he squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what the future holds, but I promise you, I'll be here every step of the way." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. She didn't know what the next chapter would bring, but she was ready to take the first step. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all they needed. It had been a few weeks since Sarah agreed to give Ethan and his son Lucas a chance, and things had slowly started to shift between them. Sarah had spent time with Lucas a few times already, and though it was awkward at first, she could see how much Ethan cared for the boy. Lucas, for his part, was a shy child, barely speaking to her at first, but Sarah could tell he was curious. He had been raised in a world where his father had protected him from the complexities of the outside world, and now, he was facing a new reality. Sarah tried to be patient with him, understanding that this transition would be hard for him, just as it was for her. As the days passed, she found herself becoming more comfortable in this new dynamic, but the unease still lingered. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully embrace this new version of her life. But there was one thing she was sure of: she couldn't turn back. She had committed to being part of this, and she had to see it through. One afternoon, after spending the day with Lucas, Sarah sat down with Ethan in their living room. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow through the windows. Ethan seemed more relaxed than he had been in weeks, as though the weight of the secret had finally started to lift. "How do you think things are going?" he asked, his voice tentative, as if afraid of the answer. Sarah hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. She had been reflecting on everything: the awkward moments with Lucas, the tension she still felt between them, but also the small moments of connection that were starting to form. "It's not easy," she said honestly, "but it's better. I can see how much you care for him, and that means a lot to me. I don't know what this will look like in the future." Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "I understand. It's a big change for all of us. But I believe we can figure it out, one step at a time." Sarah could see the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't pushing her to take on more than she could handle. He was giving her the space to make the choice herself, and that meant more to her than he knew. "I want to try," Sarah said, her voice filled with uncertainty but also determination. "I want to try to be a part of his life. I need time." Ethan's face lit up with a smile, and he reached for her hand. "That's all I'm asking for, Sarah. Time." They sat there for a moment, their hands intertwined, both of them silently acknowledging the road ahead. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, and there would be moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that, for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. The next step was unclear, but she was willing to take it. She had no idea what would come next, but she was ready to walk through it with Ethan and Lucas by her side. It had been a few months since Sarah made the decision to try and embrace the new dynamic with Ethan and Lucas. While the initial awkwardness between her and Lucas had slowly faded, the challenges were far from over. They had all adjusted to a new normal, but every day still felt like a delicate balancing act. Sarah found herself torn between her growing affection for Lucas and the weight of her past with Ethan. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she couldn't keep living in the shadows of doubt. Ethan had been nothing but patient with her, always understanding, always ready to support her. It was clear that his feelings for her hadn't changed, and now, he was showing her how important it was for him that they all become a family. One evening, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, laughter filling the air as Lucas told a silly joke, Sarah realized something had shifted. She wasn't just pretending anymore. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was actually starting to care about Lucas, about this strange new family they were building. As she watched Ethan smile at Lucas, her heart swelled with a mixture of emotions: relief, happiness, and a little sadness, too. The sadness came from the realization that she had missed out on so much of Lucas's life. She had no part in the early years, no role in the memories that Ethan and Lucas shared. But she couldn't change the past. All she could do was move forward. "You know," Sarah said softly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled around them, "I never thought I would be here. I never thought I would be sitting at this table, eating dinner with you two." Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle but filled with understanding. "I know this hasn't been easy, but I'm so grateful you're here, Sarah. You're part of this now, and that means everything to me." Sarah smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at Lucas, who was now eating his meal with a grin on his face. "I'm glad to be here," she said quietly. It wasn't perfect yet. There were still moments of uncertainty, moments where Sarah wondered if she could truly embrace this new family dynamic. But as she looked at Ethan and Lucas, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could learn to love them both in the way they deserved. The road ahead would be long, but it was a road she was willing to walk. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: together, we can make it work." Sarah nodded, her heart full. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. There was still a lot of work to be done, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but she was ready to face it, side by side with Ethan and Lucas. It had been several months since Sarah had made the decision to fully embrace her place in Ethan and Lucas's lives. She had settled into the new routine, and while things weren't perfect, they were good. There were still moments of awkwardness, and there were days when Sarah felt like an outsider in a life she hadn't been a part of, but she was beginning to understand that these moments were part of the healing process. She had been patient with herself, and so had Ethan. The journey hadn't been easy, but they were making progress. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah and Lucas decided to spend the day together while Ethan was out running errands. They went to the park, just the two of them. At first, there was an uncomfortable silence between them, but as they walked along the paths, Lucas slowly started to open up. He told Sarah about his favorite books, his love for drawing, and even mentioned how much he missed his old school. Sarah listened, her heart softening with every word. The more Lucas spoke, the more she realized how much she had missed by not being there for him earlier. She felt the guilt rise in her chest, but she pushed it aside. There was no use dwelling on the past. She was here now, and that's what mattered. After a few hours, they stopped for ice cream at a nearby cafe. Sarah could see that Lucas was enjoying himself. He was starting to warm up to her, and the walls he had built around himself seemed to be slowly coming down. "You know," Lucas said, licking his ice cream cone, "I'm glad you're here." Sarah smiled softly, her heart swelling at his words. "I'm glad too, Lucas." As they sat together, enjoying the simple pleasure of ice cream and sunshine, Sarah realized something important. She had never imagined herself in this situation, but now that she was here, she couldn't imagine leaving. The love she had for Ethan had somehow extended to Lucas as well. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was a different kind of love than what she had experienced before, but it was love all the same. That evening, when Ethan returned home, he could see the difference in the way Sarah looked at him, and he knew that things were moving in the right direction. The past few months had been filled with emotional turmoil, but now, they were finding a way to move forward, together. "How was your day?" Ethan asked, a gentle smile on his face as he sat down beside her. "It was good," Sarah replied, her voice warm. "We had fun." She paused for a moment, then added, "I think I'm starting to understand what this all means. What we're building together." Ethan's eyes softened with gratitude, and he reached for her hand. "We're in this together, Sarah. I know it's been hard, but we'll figure it out." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, she felt hopeful about the future. She didn't know exactly what it would look like, but she knew she was ready to face it, alongside Ethan and Lucas. They had come so far, and they still had a long way to go. But they were moving forward, and that was enough. It had been a year since Sarah first took the step to rebuild her life with Ethan and Lucas, and in many ways, she could hardly recognize the person she had been before. The uncertainty, the guilt, and the hesitation had all faded into something more tangible, something that felt like home. Their life together had found a rhythm, a flow that, while not perfect, was filled with moments of genuine connection. Ethan and Lucas were no longer strangers to her. She had come to love them both in ways she hadn't imagined possible when she first agreed to try. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Sarah realized how far they had all come. Lucas was laughing at something silly on the TV, and Ethan was sitting next to her, his hand resting on her knee. She smiled, looking at them both. They were her family now. A year ago, she never would have guessed she would feel this way, but she had. And she was thankful. "You know, it feels like we've come a long way," Sarah said softly, her voice breaking the comfortable silence. Ethan turned to look at her, a smile forming on his face. "Yeah, we have. But it wasn't always easy." Sarah nodded. "No, it wasn't. But we made it through. There had been so many challenges along the way. The awkwardness with Lucas, the moments of doubt, the fears of being inadequate. Sarah had wrestled with all of them. But every day had been a step forward. And now, as she watched Lucas grow more comfortable with her, as she saw the love and trust building between them, she couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come. Ethan took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," he said quietly. Sarah's eyes softened as she looked at him. "I couldn't have done it without you." And it was true. Ethan had always been there for her, supporting her, giving her the time and space she needed. His patience had been the steady anchor that kept them all from drifting apart. But it wasn't just his patience, it was his love. He had never stopped believing in them, even when things were difficult. Lucas turned to them, his face lighting up with a wide grin. "Can we have ice cream?" he asked eagerly. Sarah laughed, the sound of her own laughter surprising her. "Of course we can," she said, getting up from the couch. "What's life without a little ice cream?" Ethan stood up too, walking over to the kitchen with Sarah. As they made their way to the kitchen, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle over her. They had built something together, a family, even if it wasn't the family she had expected. And while there were still moments of uncertainty, she knew one thing for sure: she had found her place in this new life, and it was enough. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And in the end, that was what mattered most.